there's a field visit that happens before a customer would be disconnected, and we consider that, and that's considered a last resort. Another question came up related to that was around, collections, and really it's only for closed accounts. So those that aren't an active account anymore that also have an unpaid balance. Those are the ones that may be sent to collection agencies for further attempts to collect that unpaid balance. But even in those circumstances, attempts at collection do not include credit reporting, and they don't. So thus, because they don't involve credit reporting, they don't affect a customer's credit rating. And so that was a question that came up and a lingering concern. And I wanted to we didn't have the answer at our fingertips in the meeting, as I wanted to come back and make sure we communicated that to you. And as I said, Suzanne is here and I'm here if there are further questions with that regard. I don't think I see any questions in the chat from this. So if there aren't any, I'll just go into a really pretty quick update with respect to the CEIP, which I've been doing periodically here at the meetings to kind of give you a sense of where things are at. Our clean energy implementation plan is still pending before the commission. It's in a formal legal process called an adjudication, and we talked a little bit about that last month or the month before. we're preparing written testimony now in response to the other party's testimony that was filed in October. And so then we're moving towards a hearing date on our plan at the end of January in 2023. So we're anticipating we may have a decision from the commission on our plan sometime in the spring of next year. And I'll just add that we won't really know until we receive the commission's decision whether there may be any impacts to the equity advisory group in terms of your proposed work plan, if there's anything that they put in that decision that has bearing on the EAG. So I just wanted to mention that when we know more about the status of our plan, we'll certainly let you know. The other thing related to that I wanted to mention is that there will be a public comment hearing on our clean energy implementation plan in January. It'll be held, the date is Tuesday, January 24th, and it's being held in the evening at 6 o'clock. And that's, we'll put some of the details in the chat for you, and we'll begin notifying our customers starting in the next couple weeks. And we'll also put the information up on our website soon. So if you'd like to participate in that, we'd really encourage you to attend that hearing. So with that, I can't think of any other regulatory updates to give. If there are any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, Kara.
Thank you, Rose. And hello, everybody. I know we have some new folks in the group, so I'm very pleased to be here. I'm Supervisor of Energy Assistance Programs, as Rose mentioned, and so I'll be telling you a little bit about what's up in our world. To start, I facilitate the Low Income Advisory Committee. You'll hear of it termed LIAC. That's what it stands for. And our goals, much like yours, are very succinct: to keep customers connected to their energy service, gas or electric, avoiding disconnections, really, providing bill assistance to more customers than are currently served today, to lower the energy burden of PSE help participants, and we'll tell you what energy burden is in a moment, and then collecting the necessary data so that we can assess the program effectiveness and inform other decisions that involve policy and programs being created. Next slide. So in 2021, our LIAC worked together to propose a bill discount rate program. That was proposed in January of this year in our general rate case. The vision of that is to make energy assistance more impactful, more accessible, and easier to sign up for than ever before. And we're designing it to work and complement our other energy assistance programs, to be available to all low-income customers, and to continue to grow the number of customers that are getting bill assistance, and then have a quick and easy way for customers to get on the bill discount rate. Next slide. So the elements that we took into consideration were to design the program for the maximum amount of participation. And one of the ideas is, auto enrollment for existing customers when it's possible. To have multiple paths for application in preferred languages. For new PSC customers to be able to apply when they start service. We want the application process to be quick and easy so that when a customer is calling or is online, they get the information that they need to get onto the discount rate. So basic eligibility information is going to be required. Customers can attest to the accuracy of the information provided that they provide to us, and applications that meet the income eligibility would be auto approved. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but not having to have so much documentation, but rather a self-attestation of the household income and auditing it later. So a percentage of approved applications to be audited. So this is kind of the general idea and what we anticipate will be working into the design of this bill discount rate. Next slide. Little terminology here. When we're talking, you'll oftentimes see HH represented as household. That just means a household being a residential PSC customer with a single customer account. It's not open to commercial customers, which are billing, or I should say are businesses. So it's a household, a residential household. Low income. The definition of low income for purposes of the Clean Energy Transformation Act is what PSC is abiding in, and that is a residential customer whose income is less than or equal to 80% of a county's median income, or less than or equal to 200% of the federal poverty level, whichever is highest. So we put together the income guidelines for every county to know, where those thresholds are at. And we do that every year, especially right now for the PSC Help Program. And so you'll hear the term energy burden. What does that mean? That's, the annual home expenses on energy as a percent of that household's income. So a high energy burden are households where the income is, where the energy burden is above 6%, meaning that more than 6% of that household's income is going toward the gas or electric bills. And a severe energy burden is where households are greater than 10%. So 10% of their household income is going to pay the electric and gas. PSC considers 6 or above as high energy burden. Next slide. So this is just a refresher on, we showed this way back in 2021, and we want to make sure we update you a little bit. So this chart here speaks to PSC's total residential customer base. So the 1.136 million customers. And then of that, 496,000 are low income, meaning those guidelines that we've told you about just a moment ago are what we see our customers are at. And then of that percent, then you see the 152,000, which are low income energy burdened. So that breakdown is in the pie chart here. And you can tell that the majority are electric customers that are electric only. There's the gas and electric customer group, which is 16% of that. And then 24% would be the gas-only customers. So probably electric heat and hot water are what might be causing that extra for the greater part of that pie. Key results: majority of our energy burden customers are classified as low income. And the high energy burden customers use more energy, so higher bills. And a high energy burden is more likely among already vulnerable populations. So those are the findings from our study. Next slide. Now, for purposes of kind of showing you numbers of customers and where they may fall in income ranges, this chart here is broken into percents for simplicity purposes to show you where our customers are with relation to who is considered low income, which is our blue bar, and then the proportion of customers that are high energy burden of that population. And so you can see that the higher the income, the less energy burden there is. And the lower the income, the higher the energy burden is. So our discount rate is going to really be looking at the fact that our customers have different usage and different incomes in our counties. And we're going to have tiers where we give a certain amount of a discount to those who are in most need. And then as we move to the lesser need, then a smaller amount of a discount, and breaking that into tiers. Next slide. We'll be taking into consideration several things. How will our discount rate provide equity? So our tiered rates are, definitely one of the things that we'll be able to see. We'll be able to see who has that extra high usage and then the very low income. We want to give multi-language support for customers that are non-English speaking. And we want to make sure that all eligible customers who apply can get other assistance, such as PSE Help or the Federal LIHEAP program or our Warm Home Fund program. We want to make sure that the potential to use the other quality or the other programs go to qualify customers. And so again, taking into consideration how we make the customer journey in this process. Who bears the cost? The cost for the discount rate will be a component within the base rate for our rate paying customers and collected on an annual basis. And how will the rates be affected? The rates adjust up 1% for every 21 million for electric and 1% for every 10 million for gas. And that's the amount collected through the rates that we're talking about, the millions there. Next slide. So as I mentioned, PSE has some programs today, and we want to make sure that when we hear from a customer who is claiming that they are low income, that we ensure they get the other assistance and programs needed for them. So this diagram here just speaks to all of the programs PSE has, and we've got them categorized as what ones reduce energy burden. We want the bill discount rate to be one that does that, so it helps make their energy affordable. We have a PSE Help program that our 11 community action agencies operate today. And they also operate the Federal LIHEAP program, the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. So we will be partnering with our community action agencies in this bill discount rate. The things that another customer could do is if they don't want the assistance or they are over income, they can make payment arrangements where PSE will spread their bill into a certain number of months for them to pay it at an easier rate. We have a warm home fund, which is a safety net if somebody has a disconnect notice or is disconnected, and that is operated through the Salvation Army. We used to have COVID bill assistance. Right now, we're moving slowly away from the PSE COVID bill assistance. We today only have state-funded assistance that will be coming out for a little usage in the last quarter of this year. We forecast to put in place an arrearage management program as well. The design will be here in 2023, and that will be implemented in 2024 by what we've requested to do. For PSE Help and LIHEAP, again, that pays a good portion of a customer's heating, cooling, and total energy use as well. For the long term, we have a low-income weatherization program for low-income customers that is free, and it is also to make that structure more energy efficient. We have energy efficiency programs where there are rebates on certain items that help lower the energy use. And we also have a levelized billing plan, which is called the budget payment plan, and allows you to take those winter highs and summer lows and split it over a 12-month period of time. So those are in summary what exists today, and we want the bill discount rate to work with those. Next slide. So the summary is really we want to develop a discount rate program to complement the existing programs, auto enrollment where possible, providing a varying percentage bill discount based on your income, and supplementing the existing programs. We want a customer to be able to self-certify, meaning not having to show proof before going on it, but rather stating what their household income is and that they see they're eligible, and then having an audit later determined. Customers referred to additional assistance programs, got to be part of this. And so in 2021, when we designed what we wanted, we proposed it, and we are still waiting for the final order for the blessing from our Utilities Commission. And we do know that we are going to have a tiered program, that it will be a minimum of 5 tiers and up to possibly 6. So we are going to be starting discussions around that. And our next slide here. Now this will talk a little bit about the timeline. So we have a small work group that is a subset of our low-income advisory committee that we will be working with through this process. So the small work group's been established, and right now we're putting together a project plan, and we're going to begin a small work group kickoff meeting next week. That they are going to help with the planning and the design of the bill discount rate. April to August is going to be a busy time next year. We're going to be, first of all, in July of next year is when we have to give our final design and proposal to the Utilities Commission for their acknowledgement and approval of our design. And we're going to begin what all is involved with rolling out this program, and that's to train everybody who's going to need the training. We're going to communicate to customers about it, and that resubmission of the plan will be a July 1st within that period of time. October of 2023 is when we plan to launch it. October 1st is the date set at this time, and the reason for that date is our bill assistance programs start at that same time. So in year 1, we felt it appropriate to roll them out together. Next slide. So you're here, and for the purposes of the bill discount rate, we plan on meetings throughout this time period where we will be engaging you. And we definitely have a plan in place right now to have updates like this during the EAG meetings. But also there may be some times where there's questions that we would like to have answered. So you can learn about that through any emails that may go out. But we do know that at least in the meetings that you have, having an update of where we're at in the process. And if there's interest in engaging outside of the EAG to achieve a deeper level of input or feedback, we certainly would be open to that. But I can say that our schedule is going to be very, very rigid, and we are looking at every 2 weeks meeting for periods of time that are anywhere from several hours up to a half day and several days throughout those 2 weeks. So with our, those meetings will be with our small work group. So that is, it is a tight, rigid schedule, and it's going to be during the business day, but we wanted to make sure that if anyone would like to be part of that or has an interest, that we can either have a drop-in session on energy assistance where I come and we can just speak about the bill discount rate, or office hours with me. So, you know, having a one-on-one to talk about any questions or anything that you would want to know or be engaged in. And then we have our, you know, a suggestion of having a joint meeting where we either have you come to our LIAC meeting or we bring it to you. And I know that is a definite solution right here for us to start, is to have us, to have the LIAC come to the EAG meetings to speak on what we're doing, if you've got room in your meeting agenda. So I see there's a question here.
I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Today, I'm going to introduce how we plan the energy delivery system and how it enables the clean energy implementation plan. If you had a chance to review the videos, fantastic. If not, no worries. I should be able to introduce you to the concepts. And then if you would like, you can get more detail in the videos later. PSC is on a journey to ensure we're embedding equity into our planning process. And I'm looking forward to talking to you about where we're headed. Next slide, please. So the energy delivery system is a network of wires and pipelines that delivers power and natural gas from where the energy enters PSC system to the customer's meter. This includes both the distribution and transmission systems. Reliability and safety are critical to the energy delivery system, and this system represents most of our infrastructure and must be maintained while we're planning improvements or other infrastructure investments that enable clean energy delivery. Couple of notes: there are 8 counties that are served by electric infrastructure, 6 counties that are serviced by gas infrastructure, and of those, 4 counties have both gas and electric or a joint territory. And those customers will receive 1 bill for their energy. Generally, the highest use of energy is for heating for both gas and electric, although we're starting to see a summer peak on the electric system. PSC is exploring how piped fuel and electricity can complement energy objectives and provide valuable trade-offs in the near term and long term. Next slide. So this slide shows the infrastructure investment process. Our focus today is going to be on the planning box. Many teams across the company are involved in making the system infrastructure improvements. Planning is the first step where we identify the needs and solutions and decide which projects should be done. Engineers determine the technical requirements and design the solution. Permitting and real estate teams consider siting options and right-of-way or property concerns. Outreach teams gather input from stakeholders and help prepare the community for changes. Construction crews and contractors complete the work while mitigating traffic and community impacts. And gas and electric first responders stand by for emergency response needs. And I think the point that we really want to make here is there are lots of places where we'll need to be looking at how we might want to embed equity and what that looks like. But for today, we're just focused on the first piece, and we just wanted to kind of show you where that fit into the project of getting a project done. Next slide. So then the next piece of just kind of level setting is, where does the delivery system planning fit into other things you might have heard of, like resource planning or the clean energy implementation plan, et cetera? Well, really what we're talking about here is the delivery system plan informs the resource plans and is informed by the resource plan. So it kind of goes like this. We feed information of, oh, we're going to need this many on the electric side. We're going to have this many solar panels, or we need this much distributed energy. And on the other side, we feed back, okay, this is what the system can do, and this is what it does. Or on the gas side, it might be, oh, this is what types of fuel you're going to need in the future. And we kind of respond back with, okay, well, this is what it's going to take to do that. And we make sure we're in sync so that we can deliver what the resource plans say. I think questions that we ask include, where can infrastructure needs be solved with solutions that also provide distributed energy resource value? Where can the delivery system enable more cost-effective distributed energy resources? And really, our goal is to make sure that we ensure the success of the CEIP as well as some of our decarbonization goals. Next slide. So now we get into that we discussed where this fits into the other PSC processes. We're going to talk about planning. First, we're going to talk about the triggers. So we start by evaluating common needs. These may be safety concerns, customer requests, load growth, either from new construction, but it could also be from things like transportation, electrification, or even starting to shift the load from natural gas to electricity. We look at pipeline or grid modernization needs. How does our system need to change in order to support the future? We look at asset reliability, integrity, and health. This includes things like our worst performing circuits for reliability or replacing leak-prone pipe. And then there's new rules and regulations that we include, as well as resource planning input. So as we go to the next slide, the delivery system planning process has 5 steps triggered by the needs we just discussed. Primary steps include review and evaluate the triggers, model and analyze the system to determine the needs and prioritize them. This includes when are they needed by. Review alternatives and recommend a solution. This includes evaluating new energy sources like a substation or a DER, new infrastructure, and load reduction like demand response, time of use rates, or even energy efficiency. We optimize the project space to determine the best portfolio of the work to be completed. And then we kind of perform a management review and finalize the portfolio. And in the end, we end up with a short-term investment plan that is optimized to maximize the benefit to cost ratio and provide a long-term plan for complex projects, programs, and development of customer-facing offerings. Now that made a lot of sense, right? That was a lot of words, but essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at all the projects and make sure we're giving our customers the best value for the projects that we're solving for. And we do that through this tool called the IDOT tool. Now, our goal is going to be to ensure the decisions that are made at each step are equitable, but our focus initially is going to be on this IDOT tool that I'm going to walk you through next. Next slide. So this slide represents the current priorities that are evaluated as part of the IDOT process. So what this does is you kind of go in and we have a weighting system based on the different types of benefits that you're getting from the project. And we have weights and we take the cost of the project we've assigned dollar values to these benefits and we get what we call a cost benefit ratio. There are multiple benefits within each category and they roll up to these high level priorities. And now next year, or actually we're starting to figure out how we want to modify this criteria to include equity measures. Now, one example of a review would be looking at customer satisfaction. Historically, we've given a priority to customer complaints. That's from the surface, that sounds okay. If people are calling and complaining, that makes sense. Well, what we realized this year as we were starting to look at things, as for the most part, the complaints were actually coming not from the customer, from the more affluent areas or from the customers who would not be considered vulnerable or highly impacted communities. So we were inadvertently weighting projects against those communities. So this is something that we're changing now. But that made us question, wow, okay, what else are we missing? So questions we have include, do you incorporate equity as its own priority or within each section? What are the metrics that we use? How might we leverage the CEIP equity indicators? How do you use this to make decisions within the tool? And that's really where our focus is going to be. If we go to the next slide, this kind of, so this is an example of our hosting capacity. It demonstrates how we're growing tools to get a more granular understanding of the system, where the vulnerable populations are, and we overlay that with our performance so we can better understand where we're doing our investments and make sure that we understand how needs may be evaluated differently depending on the location. And so building off of this, as we get to our next slide where we're understanding the infrastructure and then communities, you know, we know things like 524 of the 1100 circuits or partial circuits serve a named community on the electric side, and 25% of PSE's gas customers are in highly impacted communities, 31% are in vulnerable populations. We know that when we did our reliability metrics, it actually shows that named communities perform better than our system averages. But what we recognize is, well, we're not necessarily grading them the same way. If we looked at what Suzanne presented, and she was talking about energy burden, it kind of goes to the same thing. We probably need to adjust how we're comparing that, and we need to look at our targets. So it needs to go behind the raw statistics to see the full story. I think, so where we want to head is we want to change how we're measuring and make sure that we're interpreting it the right way. And there we have lots of ideas of how that might be done, but yeah, this is one of those things that if you are making, we recognize the need for additional voices. So if we can go to the last slide, I just want to thank you for letting me introduce you to the delivery system planning process and where we're headed. And this is the foundation for future discussions. We, PSC really appreciates how this group has facilitated the equity conversations regarding the CEIP, my turn to get tongue-tied on all the acronyms, and values, you know, the insight that you all provide. Next year, we are exploring a joint engagement with multiple advisory groups and customers with an emphasis on named communities And we will be exploring those opportunities outside the EAG meetings, but potentially with folks from here engaged in that conversation. And this is one of those, I've said it probably 85 times by now, but we know that we need voices and opinions different than ours to challenge us, because, you know, when you look out your window, you just see what you see, right? The areas that we are going to focus on will be identifying the benefits related to infrastructure investments, how we give the benefit priority weighting, and then just what are those minimum thresholds we need to use. That's all I have. Thank you.
So welcome to you.
Thanks, Rose, and thank you everyone that was able to join today. So yeah, my name is Nate Davern. I work here at PSC in our Government Affairs Department. We'll talk through a little bit about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act today. I noted earlier there was a comment in the chat that it's now also called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It was called that at one point. It's called this. We may use those a little interchangeably, but if it gets confusing at any point, drop it in the chat and we'll pick one and stick with it. But for now, we're going to stick with IIJA because that's what Rose said earlier. So we are going with it. Next slide, please. So the IIJA is the infrastructure law, but given that Congress has now passed two rather substantial energy and climate focused laws in the past year, it does get confused with the Inflation Reduction Act. Just as a quick primer for everybody here on the call, in case there was a little bit of confusion, the Inflation Reduction Act was enacted into law in August. It deals mostly with energy investments through the tax code. There are some rebates and opportunities for customers, particularly low and middle income customers, to tap into rebates that have a federal backing but will be carried out by the states. And so big investment, largest investment in climate change in US history, but that's a little more recent. There's a lot of Treasury Department and IRS guidance that still needs to come out on that law. So we're going to shelf that. If I need to come back at a later point, I'm happy to, but and I'm happy to in Q&A later call out any distinctions between them. But we're going to put that one on the side for a moment and talk about the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, IIJA, or Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. That one's just turning one now. The president signed that into law in 2021 in November. It's $1.2 trillion in infrastructure investment, of which $70 billion is specifically aimed at energy infrastructure. I last spoke to this group in late January about that law. At that point in time, the law was still rather fresh. We had engaged a group to help us kind of figure out exactly what the law would mean and interpret where we needed to be thinking about and refining opportunities in order to be competitive throughout the year. And so a lot of what I'm going to present today kind of refines our thinking around that and includes some engagement asks with this group. Next slide, please. Shortly after we spoke in January, we started to come around the idea that we needed to set some goals for what it is we needed to pursue in our opportunities here for infrastructure funding. And then we needed to really kind of solidify what it is we needed as an outcome. On the left, you see three of our primary goals here that we're trying to achieve. One, we're trying to lower costs and improve affordability for customers. Bill impact, right? If there's federal funding available, we believe our customers want to see some direct tie into their bill and bill impact there. So that is a goal of ours to achieve when we apply for funding. Two, we think it needs to accelerate PSC's clean energy transition. It needs to do so by helping enable circuits to do more. It needs to help harden our facilities. It needs to do a number of things, but it must accelerate the clean energy transition, and we believe that should be done equitably to make sure that it's meeting the needs of any customer in our territory that's underserved. And then that feeds into the third goal. Any opportunity we pursue has got to meet the White House's Justice 40 initiative. For those unfamiliar with the term, I may direct you to the White House's website in the interest of time, but it's largely a whole of government effort to ensure that any federal funding or federal investment contains at least 40% of its benefits flowing to an underserved, marginalized, or overburdened community, particularly with sort of an environmental justice lens. So that means when the Department of Transportation pursues, funding for ports, for roads, bridges, et cetera, it needs to meet Justice 40 initiatives. If we or any energy utility is pursuing energy funding, that needs to meet the initiatives, et cetera. So, thanks. I saw it got dropped in the chat. So those are our goals. The outcome, and I think the expectation that we have both from our commission and our customers, and certainly our executives here at PSC, is maximize the award amount, right? Like if you're going to have a bill impact and you're going to help kind of keep costs low, we need to get out there and win. So I want you all to be thinking about these as I go through the next few slides. The goals we're trying to achieve and the outcome of maximizing award opportunity. Go ahead and jump forward to the next slide. We broadly see opportunity in 3 different sections of the law. We chose these 3 sections, well, primarily because they're the ones that regulated utilities like PSE can pursue for direct funding opportunities. They happen to be in the grid modernization and flexibility space. For those interested in bill numbers, this would be section 40107 of the law. Grid resilience and hardening, think preventing disruptions from natural disasters, storms, et cetera, or helping prevent them. We'll talk about that in a moment. That's section 40101 of the law. And then maintaining hydroelectric facilities and maximizing the potential of our dams. This one's going to operate a little differently. It's in a bunch of different sections of the bill, so I'll skip that for a moment. But given that we are an owner operator of hydroelectric facilities, this is highly important for us. So we will be submitting multiple applications. The federal government, however, will restrict us to 1 application in each of these spaces. So we need to put forward the most competitive application that we can, that we think helps us, again, achieve those goals and hit that outcome. We do envision future opportunities with Washington State, which received funding as well from the federal government through the IIJA. And we see the potential for phase 2 or phase 3 funding opportunities where we may pursue new opportunities with partnerships, maybe other local utilities, our national labs here in the state, et cetera. Go ahead and skip forward one more. I'm just going to briefly break down the opportunities that we see. I just want everyone to know that we haven't made exact decisions in any one of these spaces yet because we haven't seen the funding opportunities from the federal government. Entirely possible we see them at some point this week, if not by the end of this month. So we will be having to, I will likely have to come back at some point in time if schedule permits to talk with this group and engage you all as this moves forward. But grid modernization and flexibility. Obviously, our electrical infrastructure needs investment. We are operating, and many utilities across the country are operating functionally a similar grid as they did in the 1960s or 70s. So the federal government's approach is really to bring everybody out of the mid-20th century and bring you into the mid-21st century and beyond, right? Federal government is looking to really enable funding in different categories so that we can get system work done that is going to help with, bringing more EVs onto the distribution system, bringing distributed energy resources into more communities, performing enhancements to your system so you can do more with the existing infrastructure that's in place today. So again, can do more with less and lower the cost of service. And even just things that we've been looking at, like improving the way that our substations are communicating with one another. So if they're able to react in real time to conditions, we've got the backing infrastructure to get there. Because there is likely to be so much national competition for these awards, the federal government has proposed a cap of $30 million on the maximum award. This is both a good opportunity. It means there are more funding opportunities for PSE to win one. But it is also a little bit of a risk for us. We have a lot of work planned in this space, and certainly if we win an award, we were hoping it'd be larger than $30 million. So just a constraint we're working under, as is everyone else across the country at this point, as we understand it based on the latest comments from the federal government. Let's move to opportunity 2. Next slide. Grid resilience. These are much larger awards. There will be fewer awardees, up to $100 million for planned system work, focusing on ways the grid can withstand natural disasters and, in some cases, prevent natural disasters such as wildfires. PSC has spent a lot of money over the past decade in resiliency, preparing for seismic disruptions. As Nisi explained earlier, focusing on our worst performing circuits. This is an area we know we've got a lot of appetite in, and so we're going to be pursuing a funding opportunity. But if there are 7 awards given out next year, and you've got hundreds of utilities across the country, we need again to put forward the most competitive application that we can. Ways that we would do that, again, focusing on our lower performing circuits, as Nisi described. Mitigating wildfire risks, so finding where those urban wildlife interfaces are and making sure that our equipment is capable and hardened appropriately. Maybe vegetation management. So obviously we live in a very blessed area with the natural resources that we have. There are trees everywhere, which is beautiful. But during storm season, as you're all aware, those things start to fall, and sometimes they exist sort of outside of the right of way, and you need tools, you need plans, et cetera, to mitigate the impact that they could have on storms or on our system during storms. So something we have to consider as we move forward. And not every region of the country looks like ours. So we submitted comments to the Department of Energy about a month and a half ago saying, hey, as you guys think about ways to structure these programs, remember, Arizona looks very different than Western Washington looks very different than Illinois, et cetera. So we've been pretty active here to try as best we can to position ourselves competitively. All right, let's move to opportunity 3. I want to leave as much time for questions as possible. Hydroelectric maintenance. This was one that was really led by Washington senators. This was a portion of the bill where obviously a lot of hydroelectric resources in our state and in our region. So naturally, of course, the senators from Washington State would be leading the charge here. Smaller maximum awards, but again, a way of kind of spreading dollars around to make sure that you're still making an impact in every region of the country. This was going to be focused mostly on maintaining the aging hydroelectric fleet that we operate and our peers and our neighbor utilities operate today, but also making sure that we're getting the most efficiency out of the units that are currently running as we can today. Maybe multiple opportunities here. There were 3 different subsections of this bill that were funded. Many of these projects existed previously in the federal government. Some of them had money, some of them did not. In full disclosure, Puget Sound Energy has been receiving grants under this section since 2014 for a new unit that we put in at our Baker dams to generate electricity. Again, the infrastructure was already there. Put in a new powerhouse, start to make some more energy out of it, and do it in a cost-conscious way. So we've been receiving funding through that program for about 7 years now. We know this area fairly well. We have a team that's used to handling these applications, so this may look a little different. Think here it's regrouting our dams to make sure that there's no seepage coming around or through. Improving fish passage and management of our fish hatcheries at our Baker Dam facilities, working with our tribal partners there to make sure that we're developing the hatcheries in a way that maximizes their economic output, and enabling or enhancing the recreational use of the facilities to make sure that the dams also have a second and third and fourth use to the local communities that we're in. So let's go ahead and jump off of the opportunities real quick, and I'll just give you all a quick update on where we are. We answered some requests for information from the federal government. Federal government follows largely what's called the Administrative Procedures Act. So they have a fairly lengthy list of how they're engaging with the public and where different levels of public engagement lie. So the first is the RFI, the request for information. Puget Sound Energy and some of our partners sort of across the country and associations in DC weighed in. We're all trying to be as competitive as we can and to make sure that the letter and spirit of the law that was passed meets the objectives that we need to as utilities across the country. So we weighed in and sent the Department of Energy our thoughts on how these should be structured. The follow-up notice that we all got was that The department may move forward as soon as this week with funding opportunity announcements. Hopefully they'll have that out by the end of this month, and then we'll be able to, you know, put our foot on the gas and go forward with a grant application. We believe we're going to have to submit a concept paper first. So we'll have about 45 days to write down briefly what our thoughts are and how we want to approach a funding opportunity. We will be informed by the Department of Energy after that concept paper is submitted, whether we're sort of in the running or not, or maybe at a later date. And so the hope would be if we get a green light, we'll have 45 days to prepare a full application. And so what we've been doing is working across a number of our project teams to figure out where are those circuits, where are those projects, where is that work that we could show, you know, demonstrability to get out, get it done, and prioritize work, particularly in our named communities and in Justice 40 communities, to make sure that we're maximizing a grant outcome and also accelerating us again towards a clean energy transition with a lower cost of service impact. And then we're also looking for partnerships for future opportunities. We're all sort of figuring this out. I think every utility across the country is in a different place as to how prepared they are for pursuing a grant. PSC has not historically pursued many federal grants. Not many utilities do. There aren't a whole lot of them available. A lot of them tend to be more in the research and development space, so a little outside of where most of us fall. And so, you know, this is kind of our first rodeo. So we've brought on some consultants that have had success in the 2009 stimulus bill and have also worked with non-conflicting utilities across the country to make sure that we've got enough experience to put our best foot forward here. All right, next slide. I think I'll close it out. So why am I here today? What am I asking of you all, and how can we all work together on this? Well, when I came here in January, I informed this group that I would be returning once we had more information and a clearer pathway towards what it is we were going to apply for in an application and how we were going to do it. We would like this group's input as we're sort of refining and working through our concept paper to make sure it makes sense, that the projects we're prioritizing make sense, and that this group can help us position ourselves and really our company on behalf of our customers as best we can to win an award. We are going to need letters of support. We are going to need community support if we are going to be successful here. It's not just because we think that would be a helpful thing. I genuinely think that. It is because it is required by the federal grant application process. So we need to figure out, what are we going to do? Who's going to back us? And what do we need to do to make sure that the people backing us feel like they're getting something out of this as well? My hope is that, again, even though, you know, I've listed out our goals and our outcome, and we may be confined somewhat to the statute, that we find a good place to kind of work together here, and we can see if we can, you know, partner with each other to make sure this work gets done in a way that makes each of our goals and outcomes sort of shine. And so the hope there is that if we do end up meeting the expectations this group has of our application, that the group would consider signing a letter of support and in any other way helping move forward support for our application. With that, I think I've left 15 minutes for questions.